First question, just for panel. So, Lisa, your big takeaways and observations about the state of the industry from the discussions we've had over the last 2 and a bit days.
I didn't use ChatGPT, but I did use a biro.
Nice.
So I think, look, we all have a hunger to go faster than is actually technically possible, I think. But I also think we're moving a little bit slower than we should. I think we all recognize the need for collaboration. And I've been really encouraged by a lot of the collective agreements, but also the debate, right? I think debate is good. I think in life in general, we've lost the art of being able to disagree kindly. And so I love this Chatham House rules where we can come here, say a few things that are contentious, challenge each other, and push the boundaries a little bit. What I find alarming is that we still don't have some of those key elephants in the room that we need. And sadly, I don't think we will anytime soon. So I think, maybe we need to come up with something that helps us to challenge them even further.
And just quickly, when you say we haven't got the elephants in the room, what do you mean? As in, what are the things that we haven't spoken about?
Well, what I mean is that the players,
right.
right. Yes.
So you want more fangs here?
I think, I don't think we'll ever get them, but the reality is that they aren't represented and they choose to opt out once again, right? Do not quote me on that one.
We won't, definitely not. But it is interesting. I mean, we have a variety of fangs as members of SIM, and I would say we've been incredibly pleased to have them as part of a discussion. But some of our members are concerned that they are listening more than contributing, which is anxiety-inducing, I think, for some folks. Anyway.
But I think that is something that, as the leader of SIM, you can control. It needs to be that it's a two-way street, right?
It's a big part of the ecosystem. And my sense is they're not going anywhere, and we're much better to have them in the tent, having the discussion, even if that doesn't necessarily change the business practices we want to change. Mike, your big takeaways about...
I didn't ask that question.
It didn't ask for it. We'll get to ChatGPT in a moment. So, Mike, your takeaway from our discussions about the state of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year compared to last year, there was a lot more alignment and a lot more of a consolidated effort to move things forward versus question what we were doing in the past. And I like that. I think that's why I come here, and that's why a lot of us come here. It's not to kind of sit around and rehash things that have been litigated previously or talk about all the things we're doing wrong. It's an opportunity for us to talk about all the things we're doing right. On the opening panel, I said, I think the question was, how are we doing? We're doing better than anybody expects. We are doing very well. And I think that's reaffirmed over the last 2 days with everybody up here sharing what they've been doing that's working, what's not working, how have we fixed it. We are in a very good space as an industry right now, going into a time where there's going to be consolidation, both on media partner supply as well as technology platforms. And I think we're set up well for it.
Couldn't agree more. I do feel between this retreat and the last one, we probably made more progress in that period than at any other time. It's been pretty stellar.
Yeah, and I would agree with that and say one really significant point that I remember from last year was the conversation about measurement and currencies, which we have a lot, but I distinctly remember us saying measurement is in a state of disruption, and everybody's trying to understand, what do I do next? Who do I work with? And Travis, I remember I heard this for the first time, said, we're transacting on 4 or 5 currencies, we're already doing it, and it was kind of a unique contribution at that time last year. And fast forward to now, everybody agrees that multi-currency is the way we need to move forward, and we have our JIC, which I think is actually a great thing. We've recognized we have to, credit these companies and start to move forward together, and that's progress. And by the way, it's not a year; it was 11 months. I don't know why we're February this year, but March of last year.
We pushed it back because of COVID. Remember last year it was later.
Oh, so it was supposed to be February.
Supposed to be February.
Got it.
So we did even better than a year, right?
I'm fond of now saying that never in the history of measurement has one Paramount executive been quoted more regularly. But anyway.
He's excellent. But I really see real progress. I literally have my notes from last year, and I looked at them, and I was like, wow, we really did truly make progress this year, and it's excellent.
What did you hear that alarmed you?
I take notes on everything. It's like a compulsion. Yeah.
What
Can't read my own handwriting, but I just
what did
write
you
it
hear
down.
that alarmed you about the state of the industry? Was there anything you heard that made you think, uh-oh, or stuff we need to do? I mean, to me, it was privacy. But
Yes, absolutely. Privacy. It's not alarming. I think it's
Sure,
great
but
that
there's
we're
work to do.
talking about it. I would say that the whole privacy opportunity is something we've been saying throughout the week. Everybody's saying, start the user experience. I would say I was at a streaming publisher before. I was at Pubmatic, and we never said user. We always said viewer. Right? Start with the viewer experience, and if the viewer has an issue with privacy, fix it, right? And really learn and understand what this viewer, this consumer, feels the most comfortable with, and then do the hard work with all of the partners in the background, because it's not going to be easy, but fix it. Go ahead.
No, sorry, but that's not something new. That's not something new.
No.
Now that Apple is asking me if I want to allow tracking, I've said yes to Instagram because I find Instagram's ad experience to be incredibly relevant to me. They know exactly what I want. I have found such great products discovered on Instagram, and I don't mind them having my data. But there are companies that I say no to because the ad experience and the ads that I've been targeted for are bad. And people are willing to give up privacy, and people are willing to opt into tracking because the experience is strong enough to allow them to discover things that they like.
It's funny, I just had an epiphany, and I don't know if this is just a Lisa G behavior or an everybody behavior, but since that's been in play, I've been saying yes to more tracking, and I've been unsubscribing to more newsletters. Mm-hmm. Because I've kind of taken stock of, I'm a bit bored of having 10 emails from Kiehl's. If you work on Kiehl's, sort that out every single day, right?
Same, yes.
So I've unsubscribed. Oxy10, same thing. So and also it kind of makes you check in with what's currently relevant to me versus what was relevant to me when I signed up 10 years ago, right? So I don't know if that's just something that's happening to me, that I'm unsubscribing from more emails, but opting into more advertising. Also, it pays my bills, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. But, I'm wondering if that's a behavior that we're seeing.
I do think it's interesting. It came up a lot in some of our discussions because some of us who were at the IAB LM saw David Cohen's attack on Apple with this sort of extraordinary picture of the two rotten apple cores with the enemy within, or whatever it was. And it was a proper throw of a relationship onto the bonfire because I don't think they're going to be building bridges. And I was very interested in the 4A's event the following week, when the 4A's response was obviously much more measured. But they made the brilliant point, I thought, that Apple has given consumers a set of tools which are easy, straightforward. And in TV, we don't really have those tools yet in most environments. And that's where I think we've got some work to do. Right. Whether or not Apple is being hypocritical because they're building an ad business in the background and so on and so forth, different discussion. But
I actually think they've got it more right, because I think that consumers now understand better than all the scaremongering we had before around your data's being used for blah, 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 blah. Now they know your data's being used to ensure that we give you the right ad experience, right? They now know a bit more. I think it's actually much more healthy.
Yeah, and
Dave needs to get a word in it
oh
something.
yeah.
I'm good. Keep going now.
No, the Apple thing is interesting, right? Apple does get a lot of flack for saying oh, why are we, we're gonna use all your data, but no one else can. Everybody does that. That's not anything new. Apple's just saying it.
It's true. They're just being transparent,
Right.
ironically.
I think of I want to get just quickly. I'm going to come to you in a second. I'm just going to quickly get Dave just to say what pleased you about our discussions, but also where do you see work to be done based on what we've spoken about.
I mean, so I've said it a few times, so I won't have to belabor it too much. I applaud the progress we've made. It's been, we've made some good connections, and we're making progress. There's a lot more data being brought. I think we have a lot of work to do on the transaction management and piping and the people-heavy things, which are going to be tough in an economy when you've got to really look for the costs. I do have a concern that we as I say, we may be missing, we're playing small ball when there's a big ball game happening. I remember more than 20 years ago when Google came to the IAB the first time, and they basically said that there's $1 billion advertising global market out there, advertising promotion, and that they were going to be on track to try to get 10% of that. And that was just blew everyone's like, not possible. There's never been a company that had done more in the world probably than a few $1 billion of advertising. And they did. And I think that there's no question video, I think Matt's points were really important. There's no question that video has a scarcity and operates differently in its time and attention of people that's going to actually give a really unique position to those companies that control it. You don't need 40,000 publishers in the CTV world, you need 30. And those 30, but we're seeing such strong moves with really data-driven companies in that space that have direct relationships with consumers, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, that I think, they are going to be setting the market. And if they're here or not here, they may not need us.
I think the key you said there is publishers, and I want to just pivot that to content producers, because I think that there's still a danger. I'm a data geek, don't get me wrong. I love my data, but we have to have premium content. We have to have the Paramounts, the Netflix, the NBCs, and sorry if I missed your name. But we have to have that premium content that is there so that consumers want to actually engage and be there in the first place.
No one produces more in the world than Netflix today.
They buy a lot too.
Well,
It says
So they
Netflix
spend-
originals
they-
on a lot of BBC stuff.
same from both sides. I mean, they buy from studios, but they invest more than anybody.
So let's
And
just-
actually, what you just triggered something else. Just one of the interesting things to me is a lot of the content that's on Netflix that I watch, because I'm a Brit, is ITV stuff that is actually pre-purposed for an ad. So you have this weird, stilted kind of thing
Yes.
in the middle. So that's where the opportunity is on Netflix, from my perspective. But that's a bit of a pivot and a...
Let's bring in Alan quickly.
Yeah, so
Can we-
just to circle back to something
I think you're-
Mike and Lisa were talking about, the reason people believe Apple is because Apple spent 40 years doing big branding stuff to make sure that everybody loved them. It's sort of why Southwest Airlines...
And created amazing products
Yes.
that work.
But people, so even though, to your point, like they're probably not doing anything more about privacy than Google is, they've gotten people to believe that they are, which is sort of circles back to a lot of sub-conversations about we've been having around about big branding versus targeting.
Did anyone else's heart sink when he said 40 years for Apple? Because I kind of did the mental math and went, oh shit, that's true.
I was being generous. It's probably more like 40.
I mean, I'd argue that Google's doing more for privacy. I mean, Google is both my client, and we buy, through Essence Mediacom, and we buy a ton of media from Google. And Google, their policies when we buy media on behalf of Google as a marketer, they have the same data privacy requirements in place that they can use as a marketer that they allow every other marketer to use.
But because people are willing to believe that Google is evil.
Right.
And as a result, Congress is willing to go and put stuff on them because they know that will win them votes. Whereas going after Apple, what's that guy, Cohen's guy's thing about extremists, to the contrary, no one's going to win votes for going after.
Right. It's all about perception. But when it comes at the end of the day, from what I'm seeing, Google cares way more about consumer privacy and choice than Apple does.
I mean, when you go to the Congress stuff, that is just a whole nother hour of conversation, because I've never seen anything more of a farce than people in Congress trying to interview Zuck or Google, because they don't even, the questions they're asking, like some of the stuff is just insane.
Let's not give them too much credit. They've been kind of fucking the programmatic space for quite some time.
So can we talk about the money, though? So we all know that TV's great and it funds fantastic content. But I think the one thing we didn't really talk about is the fact that we're not currently sitting in a high-growth industry. We're sitting in a pretty mature industry, which hasn't grown that much. The money is there, but you look back at, I was looking at SMI data over a chunk of time. This is not an industry growing at double-digit rates.
Well, video advertising is growing. I mean, I think
Video advertising is.
And premium video advertising is absolutely growing on both a global basis and a national basis, and the consumption of premium video is up too. It's it's fragmenting to some different providers.
Just my question to the panel is, do we need to find other ways to make more money? How are we going to make more money?
Who's we?
I mean, we as in, good question. I mean the major,
Just you and
all
me,
of us in
Mike.
this room. I'm thinking about really the major content producers because I start to wonder whether there is a content investment
Well, let me answer that through an
crisis or
agency
problem.
lens first.
Yeah.
I'm curious, if, Lisa, if you agree with this. Like, we need to change up how we engage with clients. Right now, when we're buying linear TV, we're planning one audience. We're making, we're using one currency, one audience, and making a buy. As we start to move towards a multi-currency model and a multi-audience model and a multi-data model, it changes how we as an agency need to approach and interact with our clients, and it costs us more money. And our clients need to understand that as we're moving in a direction of more addressability and better media, the model of how a media agency engages with clients needs to change.
I totally agree in that I think we're more consultative now, and somehow our fees compared to like some of the big consultancies are like pennies, right?
Compared to DSPs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's work to be done, and part of it is that we do it to ourselves. Like when we compete in pitches, it's a race to the bottom and has been for years. I think on this other side of life, when I think about Bob Iger coming back to Disney, who I'm going to be sending a telegram because there's no Queen in England anymore, so I'm self-appointed. When I think about that, like it's been, again, similarly a race to not the bottom, but to the shareholders. So unfortunately, shareholders got hooked on the crack during COVID of there wasn't as much investment in content, and so as a result, they could report better profits. They got hooked on that profit.
Wall Street wiped $1 trillion off the market capitalizations of the US's biggest TV businesses in 2022.
Yeah, and so as a result,
Stock
now
market
you're
is
seeing
not the
layoffs,
economy.
right?
But the stock market is not the economy.
Totally
Yeah,
agreed.
and you're seeing layoffs now because the shareholders have got hooked on the profit. Amazon, meanwhile, doesn't need to report a profit in order to have a massive share price, so that's why the stock market is not the economy. Right. But what the impact that is having is that then where does the money come from to invest in better content, because that's already been dropped to the bottom line to the shareholders. And so we do need to pause and reset a little bit so that we can get to better content.
I don't find when I talk to any traditional media owner at this point in time who's saying, we're having an amazing time. I hear more talk about battening down the hatches, about a lot of investment, which everyone's very positive about, but about a pay TV industry which has paid a lot of money in the content industry which is declining, retransmission fees and carriage fees under real pressure, a linear ad market which is robust but is not growing at 25% a year, inflation, which is a big issue, and layoffs and battening down the hatches and restructuring. I mean, WBD alone is looking at $3.5 billion of savings, which I know is because of slightly unfortunate corporate sort of shenanigans. But I'm just saying, as an industry, do we need to think about where we're going to make more money?
Ask ChatGPT that one.
I think that they need to think differently about how they're making money, right? Like, producing content is extremely expensive,
Yep.
right? So we've produced a lot of content. However, producing great content is the way to keep viewers, right? So that's a challenge. But making money off of that content in a linear model needs to be rethought. And I think a lot of publishers are leaning into biddable marketplaces and being able to give buyers the opportunity to show what they value the impression to be, and not every time, but oftentimes, if it's infused with the right kind of data signals and the right levels of transparency, and the technology is easy and frictionless, which is a different challenge that we should talk about, because we kind of talked about some of it, but I'll come back to that. I think if you think differently about how you're monetizing, you can make more money. And to Dave's point, the video business globally is growing. It's a massive business. Sure. People are consuming online video, short form, long form, all over the world. Every single market in the world, streaming consumption is growing. It may be in different ways, different devices, different pricing, but it's absolutely a growing market.
It's definitely growing, but I think I often hear people talk about changing the engines on the aeroplane while in mid-flight. I think Netflix published something completely unself-interested, of course, but they published something recently just suggesting that the operating losses of all the big streaming services are minus 20 billion or something, and they're the only one in profit. It's a tough market. It's tough thing to pull off, it seems to me.
Well, I think, I mean, the point you make, I mean, a lot of what the market cap that came out of the television companies was because there was an expectation that Netflix multiple of it held was going to buy them, and they were all positioning. I mean, Jeff Bewkes was pretty open about that. They were all positioning themselves to be bought by Apple or Netflix, and that was what the street was betting on, not on profits, but on intellectual property out of the studios. I think if people have like heard Randy Rothenberg, you know, the longtime head of the IAB on this, he has a thesis that we're going to see an entire reimagining of Hollywood, and that we're going to totally change the cost structures of it. Right now, it's highly centralized. It's interesting, the local production that Amazon is doing and Netflix is doing and not going through classic Hollywood. They're investing in studios in Mexico and Romania and you know, changing content and bringing content. I mean, I love all the Brit shows that we get to see. So, and I think the power of brands will matter. I thought it was interesting that you know, Southwest Air is mentioned, and you know, Sam Bloom Camelot, people that may not know, was the quiet agency in Dallas. That was their work for 40 years. And he did the first insertion order in Netflix. So the point is, those companies that have tracked these things along the way, it is on your wall, isn't it? The very first insertion order in Netflix, it's like, you know, there's a reason these win and you find the high leverage points.
I guess my question is just how do we turn Wall Street into bulls about the media industry? Because they're pretty bearish about large parts of it at the moment.
You have to, to your point, like you have to change the cost structure of how much content costs. I mean, that is a big like handcuff on the studios right now. Change where you're making the content, bring the cost down, and at the same time, change the monetization models. There are ways to make more money off of this content. Somebody was saying it before about education. I think education across the industry, everybody from the buyers to the viewers to the studios really have to understand there's a different way now that we should be thinking about making money off of this expensive content, and we have to bring content costs down.
I really want to know which was the ChatGPT question.
Yeah.
Which one was it?
So actually, if anyone's on the 3:30 the Delta flight, it's been delayed till 3:30. But so one of the questions you gave us this morning was the TV media owners one. You want to ask the question?
Right.
I'll answer as ChatGPT.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So ask the question.
Right. TV media owners in the US are investing heavily in transformation and in new advanced advertising offerings, but there are still barriers to scaling up and driving revenue growth. What do you see as the key barriers?
All right, so ChatGPT is telling us there are several key barriers that are preventing U.S. media owners in the TV media owners in the U.S. from scaling up and driving revenue growth. Advertiser reluctance to embrace change, and then it explains why that is. Lack of standardization, complexity of the ecosystem. They explain it all, so I'm not going to read everything. Competition from digital media. This one's interesting. TV media owners are facing increasing competition from digital, which offers highly targeted and measurable advertising opportunities. This makes it difficult for TV media owners to attract and retain advertisers.
Can I just say?
Oh my God, drop
Wow.
the mic. We're all going home. Let's all
Hold on,
retire.
there's one more. There's one more.
Great strategy consultants of the world despair. Wait, go on. What's the?
And the last one is fragmented viewership habits. The rise of streaming and on-demand viewing has resulted in fragmented linear TV viewing landscape, making it difficult for TV media owners to reach and engage audiences at scale.
I thought that's
Okay, so
Like every single person in this room would have answered the question that way. And this,
There's one key point they left out, which is, for years, the TV industry has gotten tens of billions of dollars in carriage and retrans fees that we all pay to our cable companies. That goes away when you go to streaming, and that's literally tens of billions of dollars. So they got very used to like just giving money out like a lottery winner, and streaming can be a very profitable business, but it's be more like the UK TV industry than the old US industry where you had all that money. And no one...
So held up by the government?
No one really...
That's not true. It's gently propped.
In the UK TV industry?
But we can come back and talk about.
Is that the answer?
I just want to know how many people are upset because they paid Mike Dean $50,000 for that paragraph. I know I did, but no, I'm joking.
I
It's a
think
joke.
that
It's a joke.
fragmentation of consumption is a really interesting point. We talk about this a little bit too, that streamers now, post-pandemic, have different competitors that they need to be thinking about. It's not just Netflix versus Disney Plus. It's Netflix versus my kid's basketball game that I can go to now. And
I haven't heard anybody mention Mr. Beast yet. Has it been mentioned since we've been here? Did somebody mention it yesterday?
I talked to my nephew about him about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah. Okay. I had a conversation. We've been having conversations internally about how we treat Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is a media company.
And a CPG company now.
Yes,
too.
and a CPG company and a restaurant brand. At what point will somebody like NBC or somebody else say, this guy is our next Jimmy Fallon, or this guy is our next Jimmy Kimmel? And it's going to look very different than what a late night talk show looks like right now. But why not bring Mr. Beast in? Why not have Comcast NBC Universal acquire Mr. Beast and do a Mr. Beast at the Oscars feed of the Oscars with Mr. Beast and his friends as how that generation watches the Oscars? The same way for Amazon's Thursday Night Football game, they have a kids-focused feed, and how Viacom or Paramount did one of their NFL games on Nickelodeon and tailored it to that generation. Mr. Beast is that for that generation.
And that's what ChatGPT won't give us, right? Is the human aspect, because like that answer that you read, we could all answer that. And yeah, I did the whole drop the mic, I'm going home. But the reality is the human insight and the human behavior is not there. So understanding that there are alternatives. So if I look at Mark, there's Uber. I can think about different ways to capture attention in moments of receptivity.
Exactly.
So it's about thinking more holistically about the consumer experience and understanding human behavior, behavioral science, and then also moments of receptivity.
Yep.
And the permission to engage at the right time
Right.
as well, which I don't think ChatGPT is going to give me that. If it does, then
I mean, it's been around for a month. Give it some time.
And I would say that folks like
Does
what
it
Mark was
coincide
talking
with-
about yesterday with Uber and screens in Ubers and delivering the right kind of content to people in an Uber when they're in a lean back. I'm open to being distracted with this content and talk to mode. I mean, I think that's something we all need to think more about, that it's not just a TV on a living room wall anymore, a mobile device or a tablet. It's screens everywhere and different levels of engagement everywhere, because people are leaving their homes and interacting with humans and
Okay, so we've got
ChatGPT.
5 minutes. We
Yes.
lose Dave in 3 minutes. And we've got a quick comment from Sam and a final question.
First of all, Mike, that's a great comment. So we've done 2 integrations in Mr. Beast. Same price as an NFC playoff game, double the results.
Yeah.
Wow.
And on top of that, the client, like the son of the chief strategy officer, said that it was the coolest thing that we'd ever done. And so it's interesting. I mean, that is a huge, huge, huge thing. And everyone's thinking about that. And when, to your point about when those characters transition to a different platform, massive.
I mean, there is a really exciting discussion to be had about the creator economy and about the kind of democratization and access to talent with it. It's staggeringly exciting.
Well, that's another part of the ecosystem, even in programmatic, we haven't talked about, which is the creative production.
Right.
And that's going to be, you talk about the ChatGPT, like on just on the creative stuff, holy smokes. I mean, that's got a huge implication here. What
Okay.
happens when you can do 1,000 ads?
We've got 4 minutes, 2 minutes of Dave. So I'm going to start with Dave. The one big discussion that you would like to have at the next Beet retreat, this is shameless self-promotion, but it's a good way to end, which is really code for what's the big discussion we as an industry should be having. It might be a discussion we're already having, but we want to double down on and really refocus on. Is there something big you'd like to
I
talk
think
about?
actually getting a little bit more sometimes into the transaction plumbing issue, because I think
Right.
that is so critical. I mean, the reason that TV has been able to scale so well was Michael Donovan in the DDS. And I think that understanding what that looks like, because we know what needs to happen in it. The Paramount piece is is excellent. I mean, it's like living the last 14 years of my life when I was reading that. But I think the people that have to deal with the plumbing all across the ecosystem, having that conversation in a deeper way even.
Great conversation. And a massive thank you, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
For your contributions.
Just want to say how convincing Dave
Just
is.
quickly, thank you,
he's-
Dave.
Yes.
He only left early to get his
I bought a
second plan.
TV last night because of him. So, I mean, he's like literally, just whatever he says, you're like, yes.
It's good.
A bit up.
So, Nicole,
Thank you.
the transaction plumbing is a great point. What's the big thing you'd like us all to be talking about over the course of the next 12 months?
We started with it in the first panel Wednesday evening about frequency capping and how complicated that was. And I thought it was an interesting discussion because the folks on the stage, I didn't feel were the ones who had the power to actually fix that. I think that a lot of the folks who were there, it was like publishers and also buyers. I believe that problem and solution sits with the technology that supports the supply side. Because if you think about all the different layers and all the different partners who are working together or not working together, that creates a lot of challenge to have like real frequency capping and the ability to control. The demand-side platforms can do so much, but then when you've got an SSP and an ad server and an SSAI and you've got all of these different pieces, there's a lot of opportunity to screw that up. So I think there's a lot of work on
Which
that
I kind
side.
of take as code for let's talk about how we really improve the advertising experience.
And that will improve the advertiser experience, that'll improve
And
the
viewer
viewer
loyalty
experience.
and-
It's table stakes, it's critical. I think that's OpenRTB 2.6 is going to help with some of that, but I think in this next year, this cooperation with supply side tech, I think is critical, and I think we're going to see more of it.
Great. Mike?
I think we need to do a better job accounting for fees, but fee flow, fee structure. When everybody's taking pennies off the dollar, we need to better understand at each impression level what value is being added by having this person in the workflow or this data set in the workflow or this part of the transaction in the workflow. And we need better understanding of what our expectations are, especially on the buy side, of like every penny we spend on a platform should generate what X what results, right? 3 times results, 5 times results, but look at it at an impression level.
Great. I love it. Financial transparency, that conversation.
Okay,
Lisa, you get a final word. This
I'm
is
going to
it.
go in a slightly different direction. And I've got 2, unfortunately, because I'm greedy. The first is about creativity. I think that we need to bring the whole idea of content creation into this forum because it's intrinsically linked to the output and the outcomes that we're expecting. And the second thing is the pointy end, so commerce and retail media. I think that, there's a really great opportunity. There's a big growth area there. It's been previously untapped and hidden in a lot of our clients' organizations and not held to even anywhere near the same standards that we set. So I think there's a massive opportunity there for us to connect the dots end to end.
Was that both of them?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Creativity is one, commerce is the other.
Sorry. That's a great place to pause then in that case. So, a massive thank you, not just to the panelists here, but to all of our speakers. We're going to be shaking up the format at the next Beet retreat. We have some new content ideas, but if you have ideas you'd like to feed into the process, please do, because we'd love to get them. We'll send out a feedback form shortly. But a massive thank you to our partners, to our panelists, to Andy, Christy, Katie, TK, Joanna, and the amazing Justin, and the production team, and to all of you. Thank you.